Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for clicking on the YouTube page. Thank you for joining. This is Truth for the Youth with your boy, Max Vapor. And we are going to get right into it. So what I want to bring to people's attention today is something that I found just to be a bit odd. Just, a little bit suspicious, if you will. When I was playing the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, I ran across the name Mehrunes Dagon. And before, it didn't strike me as odd, but as I was doing a bit of Bible study, the name Dagon came up, and I just thought to myself, isn't that kind of odd?
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
Is it pure coincidence that you have a deity from the Old Testament, a false god with the name Dagon that was worshipped by the Philistines, and you also have that same name showing up in the Elder Scrolls lore and associated with Mehrunes Dagon, who is, if you don't know, basically, for lack of a better term, a demon, a devil, whatever you want to call it. He is what the Elder Scrolls lore has dubbed a Daedra. You have the Daedra and you have the Aedra. Aedra are the good, deities that created the world that the video game takes place in. Whether you're the Dragonborn, whether you are the Navarine, whether you are the hero of Cyrodiil, you are playing in the world of Nirn. I believe that's what the planet is called where the games take place. And then you have, of course, Skyrim, Daggerfall, Morrowind, which is, for lack of a better term, the cities or continents, or however you would like to classify it. And you have the good, gods and the bad ones. The good ones sacrifice their energy and their power to create the world where all of the humans and the Mer and for lack of for people who don't know, all of the cat-like people, the lizard people, the dark elves, the high elves, they all live on the planet, and some of them have cults that are associated with different deities. And you have one which is, of course, Mehrunes Dagon. He is the prime antagonist of Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, and he tries to bring his demon world of Oblivion into the real world and take over, but the ruler, the Septum line, has like a special power or whatever, and they can basically block the realm of Oblivion and keep it isolated. And I'm not saying that these two entities are exactly alike, because when you look at pictures of Mehrunes Dagon, he is the basically archetype of what a demon would look like. He has the horns, he has 4 arms, he is all red and scary looking and whatnot. And the Dagon that is worshipped by the Philistines in the Bible has a completely different appearance. They can take their creation and style it however they wish. There's obviously some sort of artistic creativity that is taking place, but I think it is definitely maybe potentially influenced by, of course, what we have here in, the real world. It's like the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. The Dagon of the Bible basically is a fish god with, the upper body of a man and the lower body of a fish. He was associated with, fertility, crop harvest, that type of thing. It's stated that documents found at Mari named Dagon as one of the chief deities of the Amorites. And they basically lived in the upper and westernmost region of Mesopotamia. The Dagon in the Old Testament of the Bible that is mentioned in Judges chapter 16 verse 23, where basically the Philistines offer a great sacrifice to Dagon because they believe that Dagon delivered Samson into their hands. So for those out there who do not know who Samson is, he is a person who in the Bible had really long hair, and he ended up marrying a woman named Delilah, who basically, was just trifling. She double-crossed him, got his hair cut off, and, he ended up dying, due to those circumstances. But let's just go over very briefly, what happens in Judges and what the Israelite people were facing at this time. In Judges, around this time, Samson was believed to have lived during the period of 1119 to 1079 BC. And at this time, Joshua had already passed away. And Joshua is the man who took over, basically leading the Israelites after Moses had passed away. So this is, after Moses, after Egypt, they're, into the promised land now. Joshua is leading them, and now he has since passed away. And the Israelites are kind of lacking in terms of strong leadership to guide them and keep them on track so that they can basically, continue to do what Yahweh asked of them, because they had a covenant with Yahweh, and as long as the Israelite people did what was commanded of them, then the land would be theirs, and all of their enemies would, basically be their footstool. And unfortunately, the Israelites, couldn't live up to that. And to be perfectly honest, no one can really live up to, all of the laws that are laid out in the book. And this is why, Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach in Hebrew, this is why he was sent, to basically be our salvation. There is no deed, no type of works. There is nothing that you can do to sort of almost like buy your way into heaven. It is a grace that is extended to us from, Father Yah. But let's get back to what's going on with the Israelites at this time. Because Joshua was the one who would, lead the armies of the Israelite tribes against the Canaanites and help them to claim the land that was promised to them by Yahweh. And again, he is now passed away. And unfortunately, the Israelite people start basically backsliding. They were commanded to wipe out all of the other uh, peoples and all of the other tribes that lived in the land of Canaan. They decided to let those people stay and basically live amongst them. And because of that, it made the Most High angry. So basically, what it states in Judges chapter 2, verses 2 to 3. And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. So basically what that is saying is that because the Israelites didn't do what they were commanded to, and drive these people out of the promised land and destroy all of these idols to false gods, the Lord was going to use their disobedience to basically prove a point. That if you don't want to listen to the voice of Yah, then you are going to stumble because of these people that are still around you. These other tribes worship other gods, and you are supposed to only follow the voice of the Most High. But because you didn't do that, basically kind of like the situation, what happened with Samson is sort of almost like a microcosm of what happened to the Israelite people as a whole. So skipping ahead a bit further in Judges, it states Joshua and his generation passed away, and the generation that came up after them did not know Yahweh like their forefathers. So they didn't have that relationship with him that they were supposed to have, and even that we are supposed to have to this day. We let other religions sort of cloud our judgment and let their philosophies seep in, and now you have all of these different types of Christianity out there that don't reflect what it actually says in the Bible. So basically in Judges chapter 2 verses 11 to 12, it says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them and bowed down to them. So if anyone knows the Most High, yes, he is a God of love, but he is also a jealous God. It says that thou shalt not have any other gods before me. And that's exactly what the Israelite people did, which angered the Lord. So because of the Israelites' disobedience, the Most High allowed Israel to be plundered and to be sold into the hands of their enemies. It states in the Bible on several occasions that the people of Israel were carried away into Assyria and Babylon and so on, and they weren't winning the wars that they had won before. For example, when Moses and Joshua was leading them, God was with them, and they would send other stronger forces fleeing, because if God is against you, I mean, excuse me. If God is with you, then who can be against you? So, what ends up happening is Yahweh, the Most High, ends up raising up judges who would save Israel out of the hands of those who had plundered them. But the thing is, the judges would only live but for so long. So a judge would, be brought up. The judge would preside over Israel, and as soon as that judge, got them on the right track, had them doing what was right, had them worshiping the Lord, as soon as that judge passed away, the people would basically go back to, worshiping the Baals. And in certain parts of the Bible, it says the Baals, which refers to, just the other, false gods. Again, I'll go into this more when I do the video on Molech Baal, but the Baals were basically used as the term to refer to other false deities. But there's also a god that is associated with Baal. We pick up with Judges chapter 13:1, and it talks about Samson being born. And after he is born and grows up and everything, he spots a Philistine woman in one of the border towns along Judah's northern border. And at this time, the people of Israel were basically given over to the hands of the Philistines for about 40 years. And the Philistines were ruling over them because of, like what I had said before, how the Israelites did evil in the sight of Yahweh. It is a bit concerning that Samson is so enamored with the Philistine women, because the one that he spots and the one that he wants to be his wife is not the infamous Delilah. This one is one that he spots, and he tells his parents, hey, please go and get her for me. She's pleasing to me. And even his parents are like, hey, why can't you pick someone from the tribe of Israel? Little did they know that this, lust for the Philistine women was put on the heart of Samson by the Most High, simply because the Most High wanted to teach the people of Israel a lesson. And basically what ends up happening with this first woman is before they can even really get married, that woman is, it's kind of gross, but before Samson can consummate the marriage, the woman is given to her father's friend, I believe. And so Samson doesn't proceed with that marriage. So now we move on to the infamous Delilah. And Samson meets her in a valley located in the western foothills of Judah. And by this point, the Philistines know that Samson, loves Philistine women and that he is in love with Delilah. And before this, he is just giving the Philistines grief. At the wedding ceremony, when he was supposed to marry the first woman, he was walking through a field, a lion attacks him, he, kills it, and basically somehow the innards of the lion turn to honey. So so before the wedding happens, Samson poses a riddle, to the Philistine. Like, hey, the riddle is basically based around, something that only he would know. And he ends up getting finessed out of that info. And that info was given to the Philistines. And there was a wager on if anyone could, solve the riddle, then they would get 30 something balls of hay or something. I don't know. It's not super duper important, but going forward, everyone knows, what Samson's tastes are. And so the rulers of the Philistines go to Delilah and they're like, hey, we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver if you can find out where his strength comes from. Because again, like I said, Samson had been having conflicts with the Philistines, since he had become an adult, and everyone knew that his strength was renowned throughout the land. And so Delilah goes, to him after they're married and everything, and she, you know, tries to get the secret of where his strength comes from. And he tells her a lie, and after he falls asleep, she basically wakes up and is like, hey, the Philistines are here. And he breaks out of the ropes that were tied around his hands, and afterwards she's like, hey, you're making a fool of me, and so forth and so on. And after 3 times of this repeated, hey, where does your strength come from, he tells her a lie. She tries to implement the technique that Samson tells her. So basically, 3 times in a row, he's like, hey, if you wrap my hands with this type of cord, she does it. He breaks out of it, and gives the Philistines a thrashing that try to come and take him. So after all of that, Delilah acts again, and she has this whole sob story and yada yada, and he basically actually tells her the secret of where his strength comes from. So during the night, he's asleep on her lap, and she calls in someone to cut off his locks. And they play out the same routine. She's like, hey, the Philistines are here. He wakes up and he's like, hey, let me go thrash them the same way I did before. But then, boop, what do you know? All of your strength is gone. Because when he was born, his mother was barren, and she prayed and prayed and prayed. And so an angel finally came. She basically was like, please give me a child, and I will dedicate him to the Lord and make sure a razor never touches his hair. And that was, basically the secret behind where his strength came from. And that's why, he was so strong, and why the Philistines wanted to get that secret so they could take his strength away. And so after they gouge out his eyes and capture him, uh, you know, they basically put him in jail and basically put him to work. And now the Philistines are partying, and they're like, hey, bring out Samson so that he can entertain us. And throughout the course of the party, he leans up against a pillar, and as everyone knows, he says a prayer to the Most High, and he is basically like, dear Lord, please remember me and let me avenge myself upon these Philistines for my 2 eyes. And he ends up pushing the pillars and basically bringing the house down, and ends up killing 3,000 plus people, which is more than the number of Philistines that he killed during his life. Because once he collapses the pillars, he ends up dying, in this, collapse of the building. And that's just one instance of, the Philistines praying to Dagon and thinking that it was Dagon that had brought Samson to them. But really, it was all the plan of the Most High, so that, it would basically, in a sense, teach the Israelites a lesson. Like, hey, if you, put away all these other gods and come back to me and do what I commanded of you, then your blessings will be restored in a sense. But the Israelites were hard-headed and they just couldn't do right. So another instance of where Dagon is mentioned in the Bible, in First Chronicles chapter 10 verse 10, the temple of Dagon is mentioned as the location where Saul's head and armor were displayed. So what happens in First Chronicles is basically describing the story of Saul's death. For those of you that don't know, Saul was the king before King David. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people know who King David is. He is the father of Solomon, who was the wisest man to have ever lived. So in this era, Saul is currently the king, but this is the story of how he dies. And scholars say that this event took place in the late 11th century BCE. And this was a time of instability for Israel because, again, they were at war with the Philistines. And during this current war, the Philistines were beating them, and the Israelite army ended up fleeing from the Philistines. And it's said that this battle took place on Mount Gilboa. Alright, so during the battle on Mount Gilboa, Saul's 3 sons were killed during the battle. And afterwards, Saul had been injured by an archer. And he asked his armor bearer to basically kill him, But the armor bearer was afraid. He didn't want to do it. So Saul ended up basically falling on his own sword. So this chapter of the Bible also states that after the Israelite army saw what had happened to Saul and his sons, that they didn't just flee the battlefield, they fled from even their own cities. And so the Philistines just ended up basically taking residence in those abandoned homes and towns and ended up living there. So the next day, the Philistines went out to the battlefield. They found the body of Saul and his sons, and they basically took off all Saul's armor and, decapitated him. And they took his head and his armor and put that inside of their temple. And they basically displayed it inside of Dagon's temple. However, some of the other Israelite residents who I'm guessing were not involved in that battle for whatever reason, they lived in Jabesh Gilead, and they heard about what happened, and so they went to retrieve the body of Saul and his sons. So the Bible states that Saul died because of his transgression, which he committed against the Lord and against the word of the Lord. And Saul basically didn't keep the command that the Lord had given him. And not only that, but Saul went and consulted a medium in order to seek guidance instead of seeking guidance from the Lord. And this was basically his punishment. He was, it was basically almost like his fate to die at that battle so that King David could take over. And so the very last mention of Dagon in the Old Testament Bible is 1 Samuel chapter 5. And this might be the most, I guess in a way, craziest story that shows the power of the Most High. What ends up happening in chapter 5 of 1 Samuel is that the Ark of the Covenant is carried away and placed inside Dagon's temple. But the crazy thing that happens, right, is they had a statue of Dagon inside that temple. And this basically, overnight, somehow, and I'll, basically, this is the power of the Most High. But the people, went to the temple and they saw that their statue of Dagon had basically crumbled, and the head and hands were on the floor, almost like in a position in which it was bowing to the Ark of the Covenant. But we'll get into the story. So 1 Samuel records the establishment of Israel's monarchy, which is around about the time of 1050 BC. And this is a time where Samuel, the prophet, had led Israel, and he was also a priest and a judge. As I stated before, this was a time when judges were presiding over the people. And this is another case where an Israelite woman was barren. And this was Samuel's mother, Hannah. She was barren, and she vowed a vow to the Most High that if he would but give her a child, she would then dedicate this child to the Lord. So after an angel of the Lord visited her and her husband, and in a sense basically granting her wish, that's when Samuel was born. And after she weaned him, breastfed him and everything, she handed Samuel over to the priests who lived at the temple full time. And from what I understand, the priests who lived at the temple were from the tribe of Levi. And from what I remember, when the Israelite tribes, when the 12 tribes of Israel took their promised land, each tribe was given a piece of land. The only tribe that wasn't was the tribe of Levi, because they were designated as the priests for the entire Israelite people. So they didn't have a land to call their own. So because of this, that's where we get the law of tithing. Everyone nowadays, especially these prosperity preachers, want to say that tithing is what you're supposed to do when you go to church. No, that is not the case. Tithing was meant for the full-time priests who lived at the temple and handled all of the duties that went along with that. So since they didn't have land where they could, have herds of animals and grow crops, they were given 10% of, whatever it might be from the other Israelite tribes, so that the tribe of Levi could sustain themselves. And basically what we have now is, like I said before, it's, all these weird traditions, man-made traditions that, find their way into Christianity. And tithing is one of those. Don't get me wrong, you're supposed to give to your pastors and to your church and everything like that. And the Lord loves a joyful giver, but giving and expecting something in return is not biblical. Tithing, does not apply to the times that we live in currently. So now that I'm off that tangent, let's get back to this last mention of Dagon in the Bible. So now Samuel is born. He is given over to the priest who live at the temple, and basically the head priest who was in charge of the Israelites at this time was Eli, and he had sons, but unfortunately the sons of Eli didn't you know want to follow after their father. Um, the sons of Eli were corrupt, and they were just not good representations of what a priest should be. And so Eli, was basically going to end up getting punished because he didn't reprimand his children. Um, and basically, Samuel would take over for Eli. So that is what this chapter of the Bible goes into. And it states that the Lord had resolved to turn the kingdom over to Samuel. And at this time in Israel, again, they are battling against the Philistines. And that is basically a thing that has been, constant throughout these three mentions of Dagon, mentioned in the Old Testament, because the Israelites didn't do what they were supposed to and drive out these other tribes from the land. These people would be a stumbling block for them. So we're at a time now where Israel is going out to battle against the Philistines, and they were defeated at this battle, and the Philistines ended up killing about 4,000 men. So after the battle, the surviving men returned to the camp with their elders of Israel, and basically they were like the political leaders, you could say. And these elders decided to bring out the Ark of the Covenant, thinking that it would save them from the hand of their enemy. And this again goes back to Eli's sons, who were supposed to be in charge of the Ark of the Covenant, and if they were doing what they were supposed to, they would have done things differently. But again, like I said, they were corrupt. So the leaders brought the Ark of the Covenant out to battle, and when the Israelite army saw the Ark, they let out a huge shout, and it was so mighty because the Israelite army was so invigorated, and they thought that because the Ark was there on the battlefield with them, they thought that meant that the Most High had blessed them and that they were going to go ahead and win this battle. But the Philistines heard the shout and got a little disheartened and were like, hey, this is the Ark, we heard about it, it did all this in Egypt and so forth and so on. But the Philistine army leaders basically gave a little speech and gave the Philistine army that boost, like, hey, we've been winning this war, we can continue to win it, let's keep fighting. And that is exactly what they did. And they won the battle so drastically that 30,000 soldiers of the Israelites were killed. And not only that, but the Ark of the Covenant was captured, and Eli's two sons were killed during the battle. So the Philistines captured the Ark and took it to Ashdod, which is a city north of Gaza, near the Mediterranean coast. So basically, now we get to the story that I was telling a little bit earlier, where the Philistines brought the Ark of the Covenant to the temple that housed the statue of Dagon and set it next to the statue of Dagon, basically. So when the people who lived in Ashdod awoke the next morning and they went to the temple. They saw that Dagon had fallen face down on the ground before the ark. The people took Dagon, took the statue that had fallen and put it back in its place. But the next day, they saw that the statue of Dagon had fallen face down on the ground before the ark again. And not only that, but the head of the Dagon statue, along with both of the statue's hands, were lying cut off and were at the threshold, or basically the base of the doorway. So the hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of that city, and they were afflicted with tumors. And at this point, the Philistines who lived in Ashdod were trying to, at this point, get rid of the ark. They were like, hey, let's send it to another city. And the same thing happened there. The people were afflicted with tumors and things of that nature, and they tried to send it to another city. And this went on for about 7 months until the leaders of the Philistines were like, hey, let's send this ark back to where it came from. Let's get it up out of here, because it has caused us nothing but drama. And so they sent the ark back to the Israelites, but they also sent it along with what's called a guilt offering. And they did that so, basically the affliction would be lifted off of their land and their people. So basically, I bring up those 3 instances of when Dagon was mentioned in the Old Testament, and it basically shows the powerlessness of these false gods when compared to the Most High. Since this is a channel that basically talks about the intersection between video games and the Bible, let's now go into a little bit of who Mehrunes Dagon is. And he is, like I said before, what they call a Daedric prince. And he is the prince of darkness and destruction. He basically controls the aspects of destruction, change, revolution, energy, and ambition. Not only that, but he has, several other names. I won't go into them, but anything involved with destruction is considered to be within his sphere of influence. Things like floods, thunderstorms, and other natural disasters have been linked to communions between him and his cultists. So based on my research, Mehrunes Dagon is stated to be little more than a god of bloodshed and betrayal. He revels in destruction on a massive scale and leaves huge swaths of destruction whenever he manifests, which can be seen, of course, in the game Oblivion, when he comes into Tamriel and ends up fighting the last remaining heir of Uriel Septim, who, of course, sacrifices his life to channel the powers of Akatosh, becomes a giant dragon thing, and basically defeats Mehrunes Dagon and sends him back to his plane of oblivion. And that is going to be pretty much it when it comes to my sort of brief comparison. And you can't even really call it a comparison. It's really almost like a Bible study where I go over parts of the Bible where Dagon is mentioned and talk to you a little bit about characters from video games. I have played video games all my life. I love it as a hobby, Um, so with these series of videos I'm going to be making going forward, I am in no shape, way, form, or function trying to uh, condemn video games and say there's some type of satanic panic. I just want people out there, especially Christians, to know that you can play video games, you can have fun, you can dive into a fantasy world and play pretend for a little bit, but we all know that we have to come back home and come back to the real world eventually. When we come back to the real world, we need to make sure that we leave the video game lore where it is and not get it entangled with the real world stuff that actually happens, because there are, you know, evil forces out there. Like it says in the Bible, we are at war with the powers and principalities that rule this world. And like I said when the video started, me personally, and this is just my opinion, you can take it or leave it, I just found it as, a bit odd and a bit, I guess you could say, coincidental. I mean, I'm getting a bit older now and I'm starting to almost get to a point in my life where is there such a thing as quote unquote coincidence? Some may say yes, some may say no. It's for each person to decide on their own. The Most High has given each of us free will, and we can either, choose one side or the other, because there is no such thing as riding the fence. And I just want people out there to be aware of what could possibly be a connection, maybe an inspiration. Um, I don't know. I don't have the opportunity to, interview the creators of the video game. But just coming from the standpoint of a person who is a fan of video games and a person who is also a Christian and trying to go after Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, I just want to make sure that I am doing my part. So people can either take it or leave it. But with that being said, I would like to thank anyone who might still be listening. Thank you very much. Thank you for visiting the channel. There will be more videos coming soon. I hope that you liked my nonsensical rambling. This is the first video, and hopefully I will get much better at this going forward. Oh, be sure to like and subscribe. YouTube stuff.